I've been researching productivity for over a decade, and one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn is this. The only way to find the perfect productivity tool is to know what your system for success is before you use it. Today, the Life Organized series is back with a walkthrough of how I organize my work and life so that not only are all the details tracked productively, but I actually feel good. You know what I mean? Have you ever organized something to perfection because it gave you something productive to do, but then when it was all said and done, it was not actually functional in the way that you need it to be so that you feel like you can keep up with it all? That is what we solve for today. The objective of this video is for us to create your LifeOS, an organization system that's not only functional and productive, but makes you feel more confident when new information comes in. Now, when new details come in that are relevant to the things I care about in my life, I know where they're going to go, I know what I'm going to do with them, and I know how to leverage them to build on the possibilities. And that, my friends, is my definition of productivity. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the tools and the methods that I use to organize my work and life, as well as some relevant examples that you can use to get an idea of how the process plays out. Links to everything will be in the description down below, including my Notion template, which I've created for you to download for free so that you can get a head start on building your LifeOS. Now, I didn't come up with this all by myself. There are a few books that helped me figure out the right processes, the right methods, and the right mindset for this system. When it comes to effectively handling notes, ideas, and new thoughts and information, it all starts with How to Take Smart Notes by Sanka Arens. I have no idea if I'm saying that name properly. It's been pointed out to me that I may not be, but it doesn't make this book any less epic. How do I organize all of those notes so that I can find them when I need them, where I need them, at the moment I need them? This is all because of Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte, as well as his follow-up, The Para Method, which is kind of like the Cliff's Notes to that one. And how do I proceed productively and actually sustain doing all of this stuff? Getting Things Done by David Allen. I really feel like it took reading and rereading all of these books to nail this process. So that's why I'm very happy to be summing it up for you today, but highly recommend each and every one of these. After reading these books and doing a lot of analysis, I determined that I needed 4 key components to a system for organization success. The first is fleeting note collection. I've got to have a go-to place where I go when something comes up in my mind or something I hear where I will write it down. This is why I love index cards. If you missed it, check out the last video in this series where I go into great detail of all the ways that these little guys can come in handy. But what works for you is fine. It could be anything as long as it's quick with low friction. It could be the Notes app on your phone. If you have a good habit of that, stick to it. If you like Post-its better, fine. If you have a handy dandy notebook, go to town. This has been working like a charm for me because it combats perfectionism at a level that I have not met yet. So I'll be sticking with this. The second component is a single task manager. This is a place I'm going to go for one-off tasks that don't have some grand mission attached to them. They're just something that needs to get done at some point to be put somewhere specific. I have fallen in love with the tool TickTick. I think I've been using it for about a year now. I can go into why I like it in a separate video. It's way too long. There's been so many task management tools I've tried over the years, but this one has really been money for me. I love it. The third component is for those time-bound commitments, places you have to be, things you have to do at a certain date and time. So we're going to need a calendar of some kind. And you guys know I'm a huge fan of the digital calendar that is Google Calendar. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing an updated version of what it means to me to calendar block and time batch my life, that video will be coming to this series very soon. Be sure to subscribe. And the fourth component is where we'll be spending most of our time today, and that is a project manager / filing system. If you're having a hard time differentiating between a task manager and a project manager, here's basically how you can consider this. A project is something that has many tasks involved. Actually, the bare minimum number would be 2 tasks involved. If there are more than one things that you have to think about or do with anything, it is a project. So rather than going to your task manager, you're going to want to start building it in your project manager. In addition to multiple tasks within projects, you'll do data tracking here. You're going to do some brainstorming, collections of notes are going to happen here, and the organization of your archives that might come in handy in the future. And as I said before, we're going to be using Notion for project management. If you can truly nail down the project management aspect of organizing your work and life, this is the game changer for everything else. All the other things, the better task management, better calendar management, better saying no to everyone, better at taking notes, it all increases and your productivity will go through the roof when you have just the slightest clue how you handle things that are a bit more robust than the average one-off task. Here's your key mindset shift for making this work. What the books and the system made me realize is that you must look at everything that needs to be organized as to how actionable it is, not as to how you might be categorizing it. We never got out of that habit in school of labeling things based on what class it was for. So this note is for this class, or this reference is for this class. We need to be thinking about how the note and the reference are going to benefit us. What is going to be the end result of having this information, learning it, absorbing it, organizing it, having it in our system. The way we're going to get a better handle on this is to follow Tiago's advice in the PARA method. I'm going to tell you what PARA stands for and what it has to do with how actionable what you're organizing is. P stands for projects. These are going to be the most actionable things that are going into your filing system. Projects are short-term efforts in your work or life that you're working on right now and have a deadline. These will be complete at some point. A stands for areas. These are actionable, but nowhere near as actionable as the active projects you have on your plate. Areas are long-term responsibilities that you manage over time. These are buckets of your life that you are being expected to uphold a certain standard of execution. R stands for resources. Resources are topics or interests that may be useful in the future. And the final A stands for archive. It is the least actionable. This is literally a compilation of inactive items from the previous 3 categories. The definitions I shared with you are from Tiago in his book, The PARA Method and Building a Second Brain. I like them so much that I've actually put them in the Notion template because as you are going through the onboarding education process of this organization system, they're very useful to reference when you're thinking, does this go in a project or an area or a resource? What is it? And you can analyze that a lot more going forward and how it makes sense for your individual life. There may be something that's more of an area for you that might just be a resource for me. I'm going to give examples of every category so you can start to unpack what it means to you. All right, let's get organized. We need some information. We're going to need some things to organize here, okay? I imagine you have some notes floating around, maybe some mail you haven't opened yet from overwhelm and anxiety. Relatable. I have pulled index cards, some of them from my previous video, some items that we talked about last time, and some new ones to help you see where do they fit in to the LifeOS. The second step, once you've collected all of your notes and all the things that you want to process, is to go to your inbox. So I'm starting in Notion, which I'm showing you here on my fancy display. This is where I keep all of my PARA buckets as well as the inbox. So you can think of the inbox as the place as where things need to go before they are sorted. I'm going to take all of my notes I've brought to the table today and add them to my inbox where they are in pre-sort. So the goal is for you to have this inbox, have all these ideas, new projects that potentially could come your way, everything that is eventually going to need to be organized, that is hopefully in one central place. Step 3 is to conduct your sort session. I talked about this recently in a video that's more of like a guided opportunity to have that sort session. It's a 45-minute weekly review video. This really helps you to kind of figure out how to tie up loose ends, find all the things that you need to organize, different ways of thinking of things so you cover all your bases, and how to process them in this OS. If every Friday afternoon, or maybe it's the weekends for you, it's something you do on Sundays or Saturday mornings, you sit down and say, what have I done? And then therefore, what's going to happen in the future? Not just looking at the next week, looking at the next month. What are some things I'm not thinking about yet? I created that video so that you would start getting the wheels turning on areas that maybe you've blocked out because the overwhelm is so high, or you've just been too busy to sit down and think about them yet. So after you watch this video, when you're ready to go into sort session mode, I highly recommend that you bookmark that weekly review video and come back to it on a regular basis. Step 4 is to take all of the one-off tasks and put them in your task manager. Clean out the junk drawer is not tied to absolutely anything important. So I'm going to head over to TickTick and add that to my around the house list. And you'll notice that these lists in my task manager have to do with how actionable the task is, not what category that it falls in. So if I'm around the house and looking for things to do that I haven't been getting around to lately with my copious amounts of spare time, I'm going to want to look at this list like, oh, hey, the junk drawer still needs to be cleaned out. Got to do that return, so that's going to go into my errands. You might decide that some of these need a deadline. You can get more specific as you like in your task manager. I'm just putting them in a place where I know I'm going to be able to find them, knowing they are one-off tasks. They need to be in my task manager. All right, those have been processed. Next, we're going to commit the time-bound tasks to the calendar. Okay, so we have the one-offs and we have the calendar appointments exactly where they need to be in their respective places. This is where we dig in a bit more to the things that require a little bit more thought. We need to take anything on this list that is a potential project, meaning something that's going to take additional brain power and multiple tasks, to your projects list. So we're definitely gonna put Bianca's birthday party on that list of things that needs to be done. So I'm gonna move this to my projects database, head over to projects and see, here it is. I can put a deadline on that because I know when it is. Something else I like to do with project names is make them sound as actionable as they are. So even though I could have put Bianca's second birthday party, I put plan Bianca's second birthday party. And so that makes me think like, okay, there's some things to do here. You'll notice that this example, Susie's birthday party / gift, was on this list twice. In one way, it was a mental note, like that's not on the calendar yet, which I handled in the previous step. And in this case, it's a project. I put down any really important birthdays that I need to work on that are people that are important to me that are more than just a happy birthday text. I put them in as a project because usually they require more than one task. So we're gonna move this over to projects and rename it to sound a little bit more actionable. That one's coming up soon, so update my deadline. Our next step is to go back to the inbox to put any data that needs to go in our areas section. One area I think a lot of us are going to have is the area of finances. We've got to keep that up to a certain standard. So maybe it's something like what your anticipated bills are going to be. That's what this example is here. The $30 dentist copay. Maybe it's because I know I'm going to the dentist soon and I just don't want to forget what my financial responsibility is when I get there. So I'm going to open this one and I'm going to move it to my finances folder. Another idea is to have an areas bucket for everyone in your immediate family. So for instance, my husband very not subtly dropped this hint that he really wants this Ayrton Senna Lego kit. Like a lot. And I thought that's a really good gift idea. I don't want to forget that in a moment when I want to buy my husband a gift. So I'm going to move that to an area that the standard matters to me, which is the family area of my life. And maybe you recently updated your resume. Something you could do is move that document or links to where you edit it to a card in an area that is your career, something that you keep up the standard of all the time. So you can see in the areas section, we've got finance, we've got our family, we've got my career, we have a someday maybe list. This is all stuff that you want to keep up the responsibility of. It's actionable when needed, but not necessarily on the day-to-day. I do want to talk about the someday maybe list really quick because we have ideas all the time and we don't necessarily know what to do with them because they may not be something that we can handle right now, or we want to make sure that we actually want to do them, or we want to follow through with them, or that the time is right, or we just want to let it simmer and kind of percolate a little so that we know, like, that's a really good idea. I want to follow through on it, which is why I love David Allen's suggestion of having a someday maybe list. So for instance, in the last video, I told you, I like this newsletter idea of ladies in leadership. So I'm going to move that to my someday maybe list. And now when I'm like, didn't I have that idea? Or, oh, I just found a resource that would be really good if I was working on that idea. Now I can go to that list and find where it is so that I can begin adding to it. So no information gets wasted or lost or forgotten when you've begun to plan something, even if it's not something you can really plan right now. You never have a blank slate. I love this idea. And finally, we need to take any of our notes that are references and put them in the resources area. So the example I have here is something that occurred to me when I was reading a book, and I made a note of what I was thinking at the time and what I wanted to do with that. So I'm going to move this one to resources, a very much less actionable area. But when I'm thinking about like, oh, there was something I read in a book that inspired me, and maybe that's going to help me write a blog post or make a video idea, or I wanted to share this advice with somebody, but I want to make sure I pull it from the right resource. Then I'm going to move that to my resources, specifically to my book notes, because I know I have a book notes database in my resources. And there are a few other ideas here that I have for you when it comes to resources. You can also keep recipes in your resources, a Rolodex. I'm probably aging myself with that, but it's where you keep your contacts information. You can put your Rolodex in here. Kindle highlights, I actually have syncing automatically from an app called Readwise, which is really useful because if I want to unpack something I know I highlighted in my Kindle to put in my book notes database, I can find the resource quoted perfectly and with the credit in that Kindle highlights section. And then maybe you just want to keep track of the gifts that you give or the gifts that you get from anyone in your life, or gift ideas for anyone. I know sometimes I see something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to gift that to somebody, but I don't know who yet. So I'll put that in my gift tracker. I think Tiago made this comparison. You can think of each of these areas as areas of your kitchen, and the resources area is like the pantry. You're in the pantry a lot when you need to go and grab something to use it, but only when you need it. And I feel like that's what resources can mean to you when it comes to maintaining something that's actually useful. When you got to plan family dinner, going and looking at your recipes is a great idea. You probably do that on a regular basis, but you don't necessarily need it in your projects list. Couple of things about projects. You want to make sure they have a deadline so that you've got them in a relative order of how critical that they are in the near future to you. You also want to make sure that you've got a good template. I have populated a template here within each project that I prefer. And very tippy top are the very next action steps. So anytime I open up a project that I'm working on, I can see where have we left off here, especially when I'm doing my weekly review and I want to add those next natural steps that I could do in the coming week to that top list. There's also a couple of things here for you to think about. So I have a project kickoff checklist. What would be the desired outcome of this project? What makes you think bigger about it in terms of why you're doing it? Some questions about your current thinking about that project, and any other prompts that might be helpful. If you've got previous notes in your archives that might be useful to the project you're working on, then maybe you could pull some of those and get them into this card so that you can reference them as to how you might handle this. There's also a project completion checklist because I think it's great to do a postmortem. And I have a question section here because the biggest thing I think that bugs us about projects is when we have outstanding questions we don't necessarily know the answers to or how to find the answers to. And this is a great prompt for reminding you to get those questions out. What do you not know yet that you really need to figure out to take care of this project efficiently? You'll notice action items and questions might be a little bit overly reminded in my templates. And that's because I don't want them to fall to the wayside. I've got next action steps at the top, but I only save that for the next 3. There's another section below that that says action items. What are the next ones? What are the further steps? Maybe we're not there yet, but we want to have them down. And I've got a place to move them over once they're complete so I can reference those as well. Do you need any items for this project? Do you need to buy something? Do you need to create something? Do you need to acquire something in some way? And then just an arbitrary notes section below that. This might be a good starter template for you. This may not be enough. There may be something that I'm not thinking of that would be super applicable to you. Something else to note is that while this format works really well for the life stuff, there's a lot of missing categories for me here for the work stuff. And while projects should really all be in one place, I also collaborate with a team on my work projects. So I've got a separate projects database for something that I would typically collaborate with other people on. That wouldn't be my private board where I'm dealing with people's birthday presents. You might find that you come up with a project template that's more specific to your work, just like you have probably a specific project manager for your work already that you use, and this might be helping you with more of the life stuff. You can start to see why and how they coexist. But there might be some good practices here that will help you on the other side as well. For the sake of this video, I've put work and life all in the same database to keep it very clean. So let's dig into projects a little bit more. When it comes to planning a birthday party, I've started to make notes, fleeting notes, like I need a cake. She's got to get a gift. We got to do her education contribution at some point. So I have a list of things that are going to start to populate this card. And now I need to start building it out so I can find out where I am in the process. So I'm just going to take the notes that I've made and just go straight to the main action items area. Find a cake, come up with a theme, check pricing at facility. That will go unnamed because I'm not telling you where my daughter's birthday party is. Education fund contribution, send invitations, plan food, write guest list, buy Bianca's birthday outfit, buy my birthday outfit. So you can see where planning a birthday party begins to build and build and build. And so once you've got that first list, you're probably coming up with new ideas and you're probably saying, well, what am I going to do in the very near future about this? What do I do first? Setting a date was a very critical part of this process for me because it's coming so close to another very important date in my life. And so I needed to know when this party was going to be. Some of that has to do with when is it right for us? And some of it has to do with when are we going to find a place that has the availability? So calling the facility about availability was that very first next action step. Commit to facility and set date. Next, we needed to quickly design and send invitations because the birthday party was a lot sooner than we anticipated. We had to make sure people would show up. So those were our first 3 action steps. Now we have the rest of this project that's playing out, but we took care of those initial priorities so we don't lose track of them in this longer list of things I gotta do. I gotta do something because I want to, in that I give a contribution to my daughter's education fund every year on her birthday. But that's in no way top of the list when it comes to planning this party. As a matter of fact, it could be the very last thing that I do because I can do that at any time. But finding a cake or finding a bakery to bake the cake is one of those things I've got to line up next because I only have so much time between letting them know I want it, ordering it, and making sure it gets picked up on time to go to the party. So making sure that you prioritize and seeing those next action steps at the top and saying, okay, great. Well, we actually did all of those things. So knowing that those have been taken care of, what are we going to do in our next phase? None of these are going to be a surprise to you. Planning a party takes a lot of list checking and doing, but it's just having this focused area that's really going to make it a lot more efficient than trying to track it in your mind, especially, but in other areas like a notebook or between you and your partner, etc. If you can collaborate in this note, you can really stay up to date with how it's all going. One final little note about projects, something to keep in mind. I really like to note where I am in the status. So now I know I've done some things here. The status here is in progress. I find that this is useful later when I archive this card. I am not deleting this card. I want to see this card again next year. I want to see the cards from previous parties in previous years so that I know what I've done before and the things that I had on my list before. So I'm never starting with a blank slate. But when I see that a project is either done or abandoned in my archives, that can help me to try to figure out like, well, why did that happen? Or what's going on with this that it ended up where it ended up. So just give yourself that opportunity to say, oh, I can check that box that I have moved the needle on this. It is in progress. And then when you're all done and you do your completion checklist, that you mark it as complete or you mark it as something that you decided to just not do at all. Very helpful when you're reviewing your archives in the future. Let's go into a project of a simple birthday party. You think you just get a birthday party invitation, but it's not just a birthday party invitation. It is an invitation to come up with something to wear. It's an invitation to come up with a gift. It's an invitation to do all kinds of stuff. So it's a project when we are doing something. So it's not just something that ends up on the calendar. It's a project of what you're going to do when you are engaging with something on your calendar. My belly keeps popping out. So as I was thinking how much I wanted to enjoy Susie's birthday party, some actions came to mind. For instance, book a babysitter, shop for a gift, buy gifts, receive gifts, because you know we order everything these days. We got to wait for it to come in the mail. Wrap gift. Do you see how there's so many steps? Plan outfit. You're not just going to a party. You've got 6 tasks here at a minimum, which is what turns this into a project. So that's what I want you to think about when you are going like, how many projects do I really have? You probably have more than you consider. So I'm going to go ahead and just move up the priorities on this list for next action steps. I'm not going to the party if I can't get a sitter. So that's going up there. I need to shop for the gift. And I like to know what my outfit is early on, because if I'm going to end up with more steps in the process of like, oh, this dress would be so much cuter if I had a better pair of black shoes, then I'm going to need to order some black shoes for this party, which I want to know about as soon as possible. So these are my next 3 action steps. And because I've done none of it, it has not been started yet. So we're going to leave that as not started. Like I said, it's this projects area that's going to make you feel like you have a pretty good grasp of what's going on in your life, in your work. Because when we get lost in the shuffle of all the details and all of the ideas and all of the baby steps it takes to get something bigger across the finish line, that's where the overwhelm comes from. That's where anxiety comes from. It's all in these projects. Not to mention the fact that, like I said, you complete some things here. And let's say we took care of Bianca's birthday party and it is done. It was a huge success. We did our postmortem. It's fabo. Now we need to move this card and we're going to put it in our archives. And that way, if I'm thinking about planning another birthday party for her in the future, or I'm thinking, hey, let me pull some of the details I had from that party because there's some good stuff in there. I had links to stuff that we didn't use, locations we didn't rent out that maybe would be good for something else. I'm going to want to pull that note back up. And this goes back to feeling like you're never starting with a blank slate. I now have these inactive items that can inspire me to move a different project or area forward in the future. And that's what really makes you feel like you have your life together. When you're like, I've done that before and I know where to find that data. Yes, you can organize something to perfection. Yes, you can make this template look beautiful. Yes, when I'm creating a project, I don't look at white cards. I like to add a cover. And I love how Notion makes it really simple. And I'm just going to type birthday here. And now when I come to see my projects, I gravitate toward that card because it's punchy and it's beautiful. This is great. But if you don't keep up with it, it's meaningless. So get the ideas out of your mind and into your organization system in a way that is easy for you to reference how you're going to do it, how actionable it is, when you're doing those things, when it's the right time, not because you labeled it perfectly. And this is what it'll feel like to have a real functional LifeOS.